Hallo, here's Faye, and today I'm here with my July wrap-up. I read and listened to 7 things this month. I'll jump in because I'm super hot and I want to move. So the first thing I read was Der Bildhauer, or rather in the original title, The Sculptor, by Scott McCloud. I read the German translation because that's what my library had. Library had. We're lost in translation. This was one of the sort of easier ones to tick off in the Tome Topple readathon earlier in the month, where you had to read books that had more than 500 pages, and this graphic novel is quite chunky. It's good. I enjoyed it. It follows this young, frustrated sculptor who missing motivation and inspiration, and anyone who wants to buy his art receives the gift to sculpt whatever his heart desires in exchange for only 200 more days to live. Which this idealistic artist would be all right with if he didn't fall in love in the meantime, and then 200 days seem very short. I really liked the art form, and there were a few actually more sort of tough topics than I was expecting covered in this. Still, graphic novels aren't my big love. I think I ended up giving it 4 out of 5. I would recommend this one. Then the next book I read was a big disappointment for me. I read Home Fire by Kamila Shamsie. Now this for me was a 2-star read, and I was expecting so much more. It's the winner of the Women's Prize. It essentially follows 2 families in London, both with a sort of Muslim background and different attitudes to their faith. On the one hand, we have Isma, a sort of traditional, pragmatic young woman who more or less by herself brought up her 2 twin siblings, her younger siblings, Pervez and Anika, I think, who are so much more dazzling and beautiful and interesting than she is. And then on the other hand, we have the family of Karamat Lone and his son Eamon. Karamat is a soon-to-be extremely powerful politician in London who's turned away from his faith, basically to become more accepted in the Western eye of the voters in London, which that I found was interesting. And I liked the structure of the book. So it's split up in, I think, 4 or 5 parts, 5 probably, and then takes on the view from 5 different characters. The problem was, though, that this is supposed to be inspired by or a sort of modernized retelling, however you want to see it, of the old Greek play Antigone. And I just thought that play is so much stronger. The motivations of these characters sometimes just seem over the top or unbelievable. There's like some insta love. It seems weird that this one character, Anika, who I guess is supposed to be Antigone, she sort of gets it all. She's wild and political and passionate and beautiful, and she sort of gets everything, and it doesn't really fit with how I remember the Sophocles play to be, that she sort of is this sort of perfect figure. I didn't like that. The son of the politician, who basically gets instrumentalized by Anika to sort of help her out with saving her brother, who gets sort of radicalized throughout the book. He's a really weak character, just weak in the actual true sense of the word, just like poor spirit and no backbone. I don't know, I thought he was really annoying. And there were strengths in this book. There were small moments, the everyday moments I really liked. It starts off with this scene of the character of Isma being held up at the airport and just really having a really shit time, and people treating her really poorly because she wears a headscarf. And there are these real world, current 21st century moments in this book that I thought were really strong. And in a way, I think wanting to stick to the original play of Antigone probably limited to this book. Having said that, we read this with my book club, and we were at the end discussing whether this actually would have made a good play, even though we didn't really love the novel. So that's an interesting one. Who knows what will happen with this in the future. I only gave it 2 out of 5 stars. I was disappointed in it. I'd love to hear what other people thought of it. I'd especially like to know what your thoughts were on it if you really enjoyed it. Then the next book I read was Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood. My mum has since visited me and taken it back home with her because it was her copy. I liked Alias Grace. I thought it was expertly written. This sort of redeemed Margaret Atwood for me after having after having read The Heart Goes Last, which I just thought was awful. Alias Grace follows the character Grace, who has been incarcerated for murder, and this young doctor who talks to her in wanting to uncover her memories, sort of modern therapeutic methods, to uncover her memories and to find out whether she is in fact guilty. There are some really interesting ways how the book is put together. There's a lot of letters in it, and I had a little bit of a difficulty getting into the book to begin with because of that. But at some point you're really in it, you know all the characters and they're interesting. The ending was rushed for me, and I did only give it 3 out of 5 stars because the ending was rushed, and in the middle I thought it was a bit long-winded. So tempo was a difficulty for me, but the topic itself I think is really cool. It's based on a true case, which I wasn't aware of before reading the book, and that added a little something for me. I do like reading a book and then ending up finding myself caught in a Wikipedia loop trying to see what the case was actually all about. So that was the 3rd book I read. The 4th book I read was Last Night in Montreal by Emily St. John Mandel. This I ended up giving 3 out of 5 stars, I believe. The promise of the story was more than it ended up being. We follow Eli, who is searching for his girlfriend Lilia, who's run out on him, as she has done all her life. She has always been on the go. That's all we know when we start reading this book, or when you start reading this book, and I think you still should. Emily St. John Mandel writes in a really enjoyable, easy manner, and she does create characters that are really interesting. I liked Eli, I liked Lilia, and I liked Michaela, who is the 3rd character that we get to know a bit later on in the book. It fell short for me because I wanted more mystery or suspense. So I'm purposely not saying too much about the plot, because the reveal or conclusion that it comes to at the end was one that I saw from the get-go, and I didn't quite understand why it wasn't, hidden away a little bit more. Maybe we weren't supposed to, but if the whole idea was that we know where the storyline is going, then I don't really understand why it was written as if there was this quest to uncover the truth. So I thought that was a bit of a shortcoming of this book. But yeah, I believe this is the first of Emily St. John Mandel's books. Her later work, of course, being Station 11, which was super popular on BookTube, and I also really enjoyed. So now I'm free to have a look at her other books and see if her development was just a really steep, excellent one. Yeah, great book. I do recommend it, even though I thought there were some problems with it. Then Swimming Home by Deborah Levy, I think will not be something for everyone, but I really enjoyed it. So we read about how the arrival of aspiring, unhappy, disturbed Kitty at a villa in France disturbs and affects the holiday of 2 families and a teenage daughter who are summering in France. The structure of this book is really just stubbornly against what traditional story writing tells us is the right way to write a book, which I thought was really cool. Even though it only covers a week, a lot happens and nothing happens. There's no sort of classical climax, and at the same time the ending of the book is really satisfying. Deborah Levy trusts the reader to interpret questions she throws up in the story, and I really like that. I like when readers trust us as a reader to be intelligent enough and don't explain everything to a T, because not everything in life is explained and not everything is explainable. So for that reason, I really liked it. Especially maybe if you like poetry. One of the main characters is a well-known poet in this story, so that could be like an extra bonus. It is a bit of a downer, so even though it was a good sort of summer read, because it's sort of, you know, set in the summer and titled Swimming Home, a swimming pool features very heavily. The characters are all pretty grumpy, unhappy, unlikable. So yeah, it's not the uplifting read you might suspect, but I thought it was great. Definitely an uplifting book was the next one I read. I read the Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang and loved it. I thought it was really, really fun. This romance novel is about socially awkward and very intelligent Stella, who is autistic. And due to this condition, I guess, she struggles forming long-lasting romantic relationships. She also doesn't enjoy sex. So she hires a male escort to teach her how to be better in sex and succeed in love. And then a relationship ensues and develops between these two characters. They are both very lovable. There was much more sex than I thought. So it is definitely a romance novel, not sort of a chick litty book. I also really liked that this book was actually is an own voices book. The author Helen Hoang was diagnosed with autism quite late in her life, in her 30s, I think it says in the back of the book, which made me feel more comfortable reading the books. The story reminded me a lot of the Rosie Projekt, where we also have a albeit non-labelled, presumably autistic main character who falls in love. And I think it's problematic if these books become too much based on that formula and just serving people's curiosity and voyeurism towards something people struggle with. Autistic people struggle with sort of recognizing social cues in these books, and I don't want that to sort of be a punchline. And the fact that the author had experiences herself made me believe that she would write the story in a more authentic way. And I didn't feel kind of like sleazy reading about it. So I thought this was actually a really fun one to read. I only ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars because the problems that the main characters, both characters had, were just a bit repetitive. And I did at some point just sort of think like, oh, sort it out. Like, just say something. Like, why aren't you realizing that these problems that you're having aren't actually real issues? So that got a bit frustrating, but it was a really cheerful and happy quick read. And then the final book I listened to on audio was Das 10 Minuten Projekt by Chiara Gamberale. That was the German translation of the Italian original. And I'd say don't bother with this book. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars, I think, but the longer I think about it, the less I think it deserves to. After separating from her husband and losing her job, the main character takes on the advice of her therapist to try something new every day for 10 minutes for the next month to come. And I didn't really understand whether this book was supposed to be sort of true, like true fiction. The main character is called Chiara. Like, is this woman talking about her experience? Is it a self-help book? Is it supposed to be a comedy? Is it women's fiction? I'm saying women's fiction to intend how stupid I think that is, because I also think that genre as a label is stupid. I didn't like it. There were perhaps some interesting characters in there, but they also just could have been so much more interesting, and I didn't understand why they would be friends with such a boring main character. And even the formula, how every chapter is begins with the date and the time of sunrise and sunset. It's just like, why? Where's the relevance in that? So I didn't enjoy that. I was like, ending on a bit of a low, because those were all the things that I read and listened to. Maybe I just have to accept that I don't really like audiobooks. Tell me what you thought of any of these books, if you've read them, or if you are now intrigued to pick up any of them. Out of all of them, I think I would, what would I recommend the most? Margaret Atwood, Alias Grace, as the sort of crowd pleaser, I think, possibly. I'm looking at my, I thought Swimming Home was the best. And this one, Home Fire, is the most popular one, I think, at the moment, but I don't understand it. Please explain that to me. So those were all the books. I hope you're having a very nice, very sweaty summer, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.